We're here to talk, or I'm here, you guys are here to listen, to talk about composer tips and tricks. I have a little bit of a rant section in here that kind of deals with like a do's and a don'ts, or proper versus improper, to do with composer. If you want to complain about me, you can do it at any of these avenues besides the first one. I will be your composer for today. That was my little joke. Hope you guys got it. But if you guys have any questions, concerns, you can reach me on any of these outlets. If you guys want to see how terrible of a coder I am, you can go to GitHub. But today, we're going to talk about some composer. What is composer? Well, I found this last night. It was a very good representation using bugs. He is telling the singer what to do, how to change his voice. He's basically, like, in that world, he's composing, he's conducting. And so what composer is for us is it's dependency and package management software. Basically, someone wrote this, a bunch of people wrote this, so that you didn't have to do a whole bunch of management on your own. Composer will do it for you. There's a big, long, better definition out there, but what you really need to know is composer will manage your stuff for you. As long as you use it correctly and you know what you're doing, you can get that with time, or if you're just really good and you get it right away, you can get it right away. So first, we'll dive into why we use composer. Generically, recently it's become more of a standard in the PHP world. Drupal 8 has now switched over with using Symfony and more PHP-related packages, so they embraced and went with composer-based workflow because they're borrowing and using Symfony components as well as their own components. And so Composer is able to make sure that all that stuff is there so that when Drupal 8 comes up, everything works. Another thing that makes it really good is that Composer will keep your repository size small. If you've ever run a Composer install and then do like a size on your vendor folder, that vendor folder can get really, really big. And the same thing when it comes to if you got a Drupal site that has a lot of modules that you need to use. Each one of those modules, you don't want a version because each module has its own dependencies and its code base. And so you don't really want to version that because you can get Composer to build it out for you when you're ready to go in a production instance. It's easier to update your packages and less overhead that you have to worry about on a project. Specifically for Drupal, what people have been like kind of innovating over the last couple of years is that you can install Drupal. Basically, you can use a Composer create project command to create yourself a Drupal site. This is based off of like an upstream design where it grabs a blank Drupal project from somewhere out there, brings it down, and builds it out for you on that particular thing. So you'll run a Composer install and then a Composer create project to get it. You also have better module management because you'll have your own file that kind of specifies which modules you need. And so if you remember the old days, you just went out, you found the module, downloaded the zip, threw it somewhere in your site, hoped to God it worked, and you could see it and turn it on. Now, anytime that you use a module, it's one command in the command line, and it'll include it, and it'll also include any other dependencies that it needs. So for example, Drupal core has a ton of dependencies. And so if you look in your composer.json, you don't see Drupal core and all of its dependencies in a list, you just see Drupal core because Drupal core has its own composer.json that says, hey, by the way, whenever you go through and do this, grab all these things as well. And then my most excited part about this is non-Drupal libraries. There's a whole plethora of really smart developers out there in the PHP world that have developed packages to do stuff, right? Before, I think what I used to do is I used to go find the PHP class and just copy and paste it into your project in a custom module. Now you can use it. Whereas now you just say, oh, hey, I want to go grab this library. Recent project I used was to make Excel files. So there's a PHP Office, PHP Excel library. I can just include it, and now I can use all their functionality within my Drupal site without having to copy and paste or do anything, and then manage it when I'm done. Like, I don't have to manage it. Like, Composer will do it for me. Any questions yet? Going kind of fast? No? All right. Now we'll go into, like, proper versus improper. I'm pretty sure everybody's seen this picture. Basically, the proper way to lift the box, a heavy box, right? There's a yes and a no. There's a good way to do something and a bad way to do something. We can say the same thing about Composer. But I challenge this, and I challenge this all the time, because what happens when I'm picking that box up? I'm a strong guy. I can bend over at my back and pick it up, and in fact, that's a workout routine that I do to strengthen my lower back. So is it wrong? Is it improper? No, because you can do it. With time and area inner field, proper and improper become the same. You can do whatever you want as long as you know what you're doing and you know what kind of trouble you're getting into. So for here, we'll move into my rant section. All the improper things that, if you're first starting out with Composer, I don't recommend doing. Don't manually alter your composer.json unless you know what you're doing. If you look at Composer's CLI documentation, there's a command to do 98% of the stuff that you need to do to your composer.json, and Composer will do it for you. So you don't have to worry about, putting an extra comma in here and breaking your JSON formatting, or altering this and forgetting to run a Composer update, and all of a sudden, whenever you try to run a Composer install on your project server, it's saying, oh, hey, this lock file is out of date. So don't. Unless you know what you're doing. I do this all the time when I need to. Don't try to update your entire project at once. This is huge, because this can lead you down a rabbit hole that can take your entire day. Believe me, we just had a developer do this. He tried to update everything because it had been a couple months since the project had been touched, and he couldn't figure it out. After the end of his day, he ran a git checkout or git reset -- hard head and handed it back off to me. So what you want to do is you want to analyze what's happening, what's changed, go look through your packages, go see what's been updated, what releases are out there, what dependencies you need, just at a glance to know at least where to start. Obviously, the best place to start when doing Drupal stuff is to start with Drupal core, because Drupal core has the most amount of dependencies, so that'll be the biggest headache. And then once you get that done, everything else should be pretty seamless. Another one that just happened recently is don't update if you're not supposed to, or if you don't have to, or if you're not told to. This is kind of piggybacking on the last one, but if you don't need to update, don't. If it's not broke, don't try to fix it. For example, we had Jen from Acquia at our office last week because she was speaking with my manager at Open Source North, and she told me, don't update Lightning. I didn't ask her why, because she probably doesn't know all of it, but basically, one of the newest recent versions of Lightning has some things in it that are problematic. So don't update unless you have to. Now, this also can go the opposite way, where you don't update ever because you don't have to. Eventually, you should still at least try to manage all the newer packages. Obviously, if you can wait to see, like in the Drupal world, patches are created for modules, and so if things are fixed and you feel comfortable updating and going forward, yes, do so. But for this one, yeah, that. So that's my rant. That's basically every single one of them has to do with updating in Composer. So if you have any questions about updating and you're kind of worried about changing something, here's the first proper thing to do. There's a dry run flag to the update command. If you didn't know this, you want to know this, because what it'll do is it'll do the entire update, output it to you, but not changing. It'll allow you to see, oh, this package went from here to here, this one went from here to here. So, to help your updating process, they'll give you a nice little flag. There's also another one that you can add on top of this, which I don't have in here, but I'm going to include it into a different slide that kind of is same general scope. Next pro tip, or proper tip, when merging your code into your branch, and you see changes to the composer.lock file, don't forget to install those changes, right? So obviously, if you're the only one working on the project, you're never going to run into this issue. But if you're working on a team, someone else adds a module. When they're done, they commit their composer.lock and their composer.json. The lock is basically the holy grail to Composer. It kind of basically says, these are the packages, this is the time it happened. And whenever you see that, if you see a change, always install it, because if they install a module, they exported configuration based off that module, you forget to install, and then you just go to import configuration, your configuration import will fail because the module doesn't exist. Nothing's there for it to do. Now, I probably should have gave you guys a little bit of a warning, but I have ADD, so these next slides are good things to do, but they're all over the place. So let's go to a performance trick. If you're running Composer for prod artifacts, there is a flag whenever you do installs to this -- preferred dist, which basically anybody who develops a PHP package, they're going to create a source package and a distribution package. Distribution package is lighter weight, has less to it, and will speed up your build process, basically. How many people are using some sort of CI build process? Awesome. Shame on the rest of you guys. It's really hard to do once you get it going, but once you get it going, it's like watching a symphony. No pun, actually pun intended. The next one, sorting your packages. Composer has configuration just like any other package, and then you can give it a little list here to tell it to sort your packages. It will sort it by alphanumeric. I love this because anytime that people go through, and I've done this to packages when what Composer's setups that don't have this, just because once you redo it, like it reorganizes your entire composer.json in the alphanumeric order, which is awesome because if you want to try to figure out where, like what was changed last when you did a require or something, it's easier to find it.
Where do you put that?
So there's a config section, and I believe the config section is basically like at the same level as your require dev section, your extra section. So it's like your first level. There is a command to do this. You just have to. I probably should have grabbed that command when I did this, but there is a command that'll do this for you. I have a slide that kind of talks about if I go through something that I don't have a command for, you can use that slide to go figure out what the command is. The next one, performance-based, is use Prestissimo. Has anyone heard of this? No. Okay. Prestissimo is a parallel install plugin, as in, have you guys ever heard of parallel computing? So what it will do is anytime that it goes out to fetch something, without this, it will do it one at a time. With this, it'll go out and it'll thread as much as it can to grab all of it and bring it back into you. So it'll increase your performance a lot. I do this on all my build servers, and I do this locally. Speeds it up a ton. They show on this page a side-by-side comparison of what's happening, and that it happens faster. It's probably written in PHP, so I probably wouldn't have wanted to write this because at one time it was really, really hard to do threading in PHP. But that's really what it does. It just threads out all the gets to grab all your data. The link on there is a link to go to the GitHub repo so that you could install it. Next one, finding info. So a lot of people are trying to figure out, oh, what do I have installed? Well, most people just go to your composer.json, but what's in your composer.json? A package and a list of constraints. Like basically, here's a generic number with a bunch of different special characters, do what you want with it. But what this will do is it will print out you a list of all your installed packages. And then, the reason why I say stick with the Nix is because you want to combine your CLI with your Nix commands. And if you pipe grep whatever you want to search, normally it's a package, but if you wanted to just search for all Drupal modules in general, you can just put the word Drupal here. And it will give you a list of all your Drupal-based stuff. Note, if you're doing Drupal 8, that won't show you the Symfony side of Drupal. It'll just show you Drupal-specific stuff. So pretty much Drupal core and all the Drupal modules that would start with the package Drupal/module name. The next step is kind of cool. It's why. If you ever want to know why something's there, so you're getting an error, and you see some code, or in your error you see something that's like, oh, I didn't include this package. Why is this here? You can now go Composer why, the package name, and Composer will tell you why it got installed. It'll basically tell you who it was a dependency of, and you'll be able to go back through your tree, figure out why something inevitably happened. I've used this a lot because dependency management is rough, which is why we use Composer. And so Composer why will tell you, will let you use Composer to do the heavy lifting. Next is a little bit of an advanced trick, but I see this happening all the time. I did this once on a project because the project itself had some flaws in it, and I just wanted to get it done, get it changed, get it out the door because the client needed it. And I've also seen it done, well, basically, instead of you like forking it, making the change, and getting them to do a pull request so that it's in their live library, you can do this, which is basically you fork the repo, make your change. Since you have the project in your repo, you can add your repo to Composer and change the package so that it's prefaced with a dev dash. So if you were using the master branch, you would tell Composer to be dev dash master. Don't change its package, don't change its parent. So its parent could still be like Drupal, but if it's on yours, it would normally be like, for me, it's Haynes CW on GitHub. So don't change like where it lives. Just say that it's a dev version. And since you've added the repo to it, now that it says that it's a dev version, it will go and try to find the one that's in yours. So this is a way of changing somebody else's stuff, fixing it, and then utilizing that until they get your pull request and merging, and then you can go back and change it back to using theirs. In the Drupal space, there's a little bit of a different side on how that works in the Drupal space. It's a little bit easier, but that's called patching in Drupal. This is a way of doing it if you're using a PHP library outside of Drupal. Next, we'll go with the version constraints. Hopefully this will work and won't kill me. It'll make my video look weird online. But there is basically an entire section in the documentation on version constraints. The most important one that you're going to see a lot is like knowing the difference between the tilde and the caret. And then you're also basically, so you're specifying ranges, exact, whatever. So this is what's inside of Composer, in your composer.json. And so if you wanted to say, hey, I want to use Drupal 8, but I don't want you to upgrade any farther than Drupal 8.3, you will use these version constraints and in your composer.json change it so that it won't ever update beyond a certain point. So if you kind of see that you haven't updated in a while, you don't have that much time to update Drupal core, but you know that there's a bug in the newest release and you don't want your developer who would be working on this to do this, to fix it, you could quickly make that change, and whenever they go to update all their stuff, they'll never be able to upgrade to the one that has the bug. And so versions, very, very important to know. Basically, like the tilde, it's got better explanations than I can ever give you, but basically, tilde 1.2 means do everything greater than or equal to 1.2 but less than or equal to the next major semantic version. So another thing that you will inevitably want to research if you don't know is what semantic versioning is. Obviously, it's 3 numbers and 2 periods, but how you want to embrace that in your project can differ. Like we like to try to make all of our sprints the middle number, and the last number is any release we would do within that sprint. But where you guys are developing things, you may want to do it some different way. But basically, no matter what, if you're making a change to your code, you want to increase the version of your software. So I don't condone a specific way. Semantic versioning has a hard way of doing it, so you could just go on to that way. I prefer trying to embrace computer sciences, keep it simple, stupid, the KISS technique. So from here, let's go back to the slides. The next one, ooh, I touch you, is scripting. So you can write your own scripts and basically build your own composer command to do something. This is a very popular one where it's the nuke script. You basically delete your composer.lock, clear the cache of composer, and run another install. So that'll make sure that if there's any of the cache libraries start to fail or anything, you can just run it and it'll be done. And in order to run these, it'll be composer-n nuke. And it'll run that script. So you can build scripts and have composer do it and execute it versus just having to execute it via bash. But depending on how you're doing things, if you're writing a bash script and you know bash, just tell composer to call bash script. Or you can just write it right there within composer. I like to keep a clean composer.json, so anytime that I can extract it into its own script and its own scripts folder, I will. One thing that came up this morning was a developer needed to add the field groups module to our site, and then committed his code, and he gave me, and I found this error. We'll show you what the error looks like in our build system. It looks like this. Wait for it. The lock file is not up to date with the latest changes in composer.json. It's recommended you run a composer update. Depending on what happened, yes, run a composer update. But if it's just the lock file needs to be updated because you've changed something, but you already have that package, there is another command that you can write, that you can run, which is my next slide, I think. And that is, oh no, so that's this one. So this one you could run to basically check your validation. Like that particular error that I got was because I run this command on my build server to make sure that composer.lock, composer.json are working before my build server runs a composer install, which is inevitably how I build my site and then validate and test my site. So this is the pro tip, and I lost count on how many pro tips I have. For updating, there's the with dependencies flag. I use this heavily because whenever you're updating, almost every single project that you have, unless it's your own, is going to require something different. I've seen it all the time where like it needs XYZ from Symfony, but from there they've made some modifications, some changes, or created something new based off of another package. So this will say update this thing. So in this example we're saying update core, and then while we're at it, make sure we update all of its dependencies. This is the one which will take you a little while to make sure that everything works because of all the dependencies within core itself. Next one I've seen happen, but keep composer up to date. Just like anything that it manages, you want to make sure that it itself is also up to date, because composer will add more CLI commands to do stuff for you. And if you don't update it or keep it up to date, then you might not have access to those CLI commands. One example of this is like we'll say like 4 years ago, somebody said, oh, you should start using Composer, and then you install Composer, and then you just leave it alone, and then finally you come back here, and now you're in my session, and I'm telling you to use Composer to do everything, and now you're like, well, crap, none of this stuff is working. I'm getting errors for everything. I have Composer. Well, make sure we update it every single time. I run this command before building any one of my servers, or building to any one of my servers, to make sure that Composer is up to date before I run any of my commands, and if there's any issues, I'll know about it in the build process. Next one is the part of where it's the Drupal version of trying to modify and include things. There's a lovely fella named Chris, I think it's Chris W. Egan's, who developed Composer packages. Inside of your extra flag, this will sit like at the same level as config and require dev and everything else. But you basically tell it to enable patching. I prefer to do this way, which is to point to a patches file. But you could just straight up put all your patches right there in JSON. Like I said, I'm a little OCD on my Composer file, so I will separate it and abstract it as much as I can. It's probably the computer science part of me that's doing that.
So are you saying that those two lines are alternates of each other?
No. So enable patching says, all right, on this project, I want to enable the ability for me to patch a file. The next line is the patches file. If you didn't do the patches file and point to a file, what you would inevitably do is just say, I think it's patches, and inside your patches directive, you'll put all the patches that you want to do all in JSON. I think Bolt switched over to doing it this way too. When I started using Bolt, they weren't using it this way, but I changed it, and inevitably I think they figured out a lot of people like to do that. Keeps your repo cleaner, very much about efficiency, organization, making sure that you can find stuff because it makes it easier for you to find it, but also so that whenever you're onboarding new people, like oh yeah, just go right here. It's self-explanatory. All the scripts are in the scripts folder. All right, moving on to the last one is know your command. This is a bit.ly link to, wait for it. It's a really easy Googleable search. To their documentation, for all their CLI documentation. If you were just making anything, like you just wanted to make a small PHP project, like you could use Composer in it, and it will create a composer.json for you with specific things in it, and then you will go in and add your stuff to it. Install, update, require, remove. This one is very underutilized by people. Composer remove package name will inevitably remove the line from your composer.json, and if you forget about that trailing comma, because JSON doesn't like it, whereas Drupal arrays like it will throw an error. And so within this, it will remove it for you, make sure that your composer.json is still good, and then run a composer update based off of that, which will delete it from your vendor folder. I haven't seen too many people that actually use the remove command. Global command, you'll do this when you first set up your composer. There's only certain things that are running globally, like that Prestissimo is run globally, so when you go to install it, it's passed with the global flag so that it'll install for every project that you do. I tend to never make sure that nobody else is running this command when they're doing stuff within any project, because every project has its own set of dependencies, and so we want every command to be run off of those. If you pass global, obviously it'll go to your user root level composer.json and work from there. There's the composer show. Composer search, I haven't used that one actually. Outdated, browse home. Suggest, there's a way to figure out like proper suggestions for things. Half of these commands I haven't even used. Used this, actually I shouldn't say half that, maybe a third of these I haven't used. I haven't used this one, this one, this one, this one because I know what I'm doing, that one, and that one, and that one. I guess maybe that is half. Actually, wait, there's a way more. So you cache clear. This is basically like, go here if you want to figure out if Composer can do something for you before you manipulate your file yourself. Because every single time I come in here, I find out, oh, there's this command, like -- verbose or -v. If you wanted to figure out what Composer's doing, you can just pass that to everything. It'll slow down your entire install, but at least you'll be able to see what's happening. -quiet, the -q command, I do that on my build servers. I also do prefer dist, and like there's that ANSI, which is the force to ANSI output. I do that on my validate, so I make sure that the output comes back in a certain way. For scripting, I'm going to circle back on that. But these are all like the default like scripts commands that you have that you can just use by default. So before you want to run an install command, you can just put this pre-install command before running an install, do this every single time. So if you need to prepare your project for anything, that's a great place to do it. And if you just look through everything that you have, the most popular ones are pre-install, post-install, pre-update, and post-update. I've never used, actually this one I've seen used, the post-create project. And that's the command, the create project command that we use for installing Drupal, is the create project. You also use it to install, like basically you can use that create project command whenever you're developing your own projects to install other things or create other things for you. My only example to this right now that I have, because we've recently started hosting a Drupal site on Pantheon, is that the Pantheon CLI is called Terminus, and there are plugins that you need for Terminus for build servers. And so there is like a way, like you'll go through and then you do Composer Create Project, Terminus Build Tools plugin, and then it'll make sure that it has those commands for you added to the CLI. And same for, I think there's a secrets one, but very, very powerful. Obviously the way that we can initially start Drupal 8 sites as well. Like you can just straight up tell Composer to do everything. There is a repo out there for Drupal that is like basically the starter kit for a Drupal 8 site using Composer-based workflow, where you just git clone, Composer install, Composer create project, Drupal site, and you're done. And it'll be an entire Drupal site in the way that we wanted in the standardized workflow. So any questions? I have a lot of time for questions because there's a lot of things that could happen in Composer. Any issues that you've had. Basically, there's a couple of things that I forgot in here. There's a -- lock flag that you can do to Composer update, which will update only your lock file. So if you have the project locally already, and it's because somebody else did it as well, then and you see a change to the composer.json because they committed it, you can just run Composer update -- lock, and it will update your lock file based off of their lock file, which includes the same packages that you have. The use case for that is you install something, use something, and then they grab it, they run a Composer install, and they then see a change to their lock file, and so they commit their lock file, but nothing's changed to the composer.json. And so in that scenario, whenever I merge their stuff into mine, I'll see a change to the composer.lock file, so I can just run Composer update -- lock, because I will be able to see there's no change to the composer.json, so I should have everything that's already in there. So just update my lock file and make sure that it's a valid Composer site. So, any questions? Good.
When you use the remove command, does it also remove all of the dependencies on that particular blockage?
Yes. So the question was, if you use the remove command, will it remove the dependencies? I've tried it with and without. The documentation I kind of wish there was like a section where you could say, hey, tell me where all of these flags are at, besides doing a command find on the page to figure out where like the dash with dependencies is. But as far as I know, when I did it, you can just run composer remove project or package, and it will remove that package as well as all of its dependencies, unless that dependency is used by another package. Anything else?
How do you list specific versions of packages that you can install with Composer?
So that's trickier. I've done this before because that's how I figured out about that whole advanced trick of being able to figure out which version you needed to do, because in the project I had there was a dev-master, and I realized that what I needed to put in my composer.json was dev-master, so it was kind of weird. But the dry run flag will definitely tell you what it's going to do, and also if you run the dry run flag and see that it's going to error, it will tell you which one it can do. But I believe the suggests command is what you're looking for, where it will suggest to you which newer versions you can update to. But most of the sites that we've done, the restraints that we put on there, we've never had an issue. Wait, let me take that back. Of course we've had issues. There was a time when meta tag broke Drupal console, and in the process I needed to figure out which version of meta tag was installed, which version of Drupal console was installed, figure out where meta tag came from, and found out that it was coming from Lightning, and then figure out that the newest version of Lightning updated meta tag but didn't update Drupal console, or some more backwards. And so what I did is I had to, even though Lightning was telling it to do this version, I then later, after that, in my composer.json, told it to take this version, but do it as this version. So that's another trick that I need to add into these slides that I forgot about, but it's literally like the as is what it tells it to do it. And that's your way of saying, all right, even though this one was installed, go ahead and install this one over top of that one. And so the other way to do it is to just run composer update and wait for it to error. And it will give you a big list of saying, it suggests to do this, it suggests to do that, it suggests to do this, and then just kind of figure out where the issue is, and grab a version that works. But that is probably the biggest problem with Composer, is knowing which package requires which library that has a dependency on another library that has a problem in it, so that you can fix it. So, but nonetheless, even with all that, Composer has still saved me a ton of time, especially, and with Prestissimo, saves me a ton of time. So there's, Steve has a little machine, like I think it's at his house, that anytime he runs a Composer update and he has that machine plugged in, it literally like spins a fan on the computer to keep the computer from overheating, because Composer update takes so long and it takes so much power. Like, the counter to that, my counter to his little fun joke, was that he should have installed Prestissimo, because it would run faster and take out less computing power. Because it's literally trying to use as much as it can and do it as fast as it can. But the other side of that is, how much stuff do you have running in the background, right? Like me, I run AquaDev Desktop, Drupal VM, multiple VMs at one time, Docker, 50 million Chrome tabs, and those are all their own process. And I've complained to my manager several times about getting me more RAM for my Mac, but I've found out that you can't get any more RAM in these MacBook Pros. So my only solution is to request the trash can, the Mac server, and see if they'll buy me one of those. And if not, it's to shut off my VMs and parallels. So those are big memory hogs, and PHP Storm. But so Any other questions? Go ahead.
Now, using Composer, create project,
Mhm.
timed out, and the way of changing the timeout time.
There is. That's probably PHP's timeout time. If it's not, it could have been Guzzle's timeout time. It was
I tried
Composer.
to figure it out, if they got the export, Composer timeout value equal something.
Yes. Because, well, I asked those other two questions because that's happened several times with us as well. But at one time, it was PHP's timeout. Because the person, like, we'd already had the project set up to have a larger timeout. And that's something that you can put in your config as well. The same thing you can put in your config is like your cache size. You can have a bigger or smaller cache size.
What kind of-
So, let me find. So, for compose, let me exit this. Escape. So there's the composer command for composer config. That command has a ton of variables that you can add in here. And is this the one you're talking about, process timeout?
I'm not sure if it's process timeout, it's just Composer timeout value.
That's probably the one that, like, this is probably the command that sets that value. But basically, in your config section, like, you can set it up so that, like, on certain things, like, when you're doing a preferred install, like, you can tell it that doing a preferred install means to use business. Or to, if it's this organization, you grab a source, or if it's this organization, grab a stable package. You can also use config to set a lot of those variables. One of them being that sorting. If you need to set like GitHub OAuth tokens, like pretty much all this stuff can be set and defined inside of your composer.json. Where your cache directory is, how big it is I've seen a big one that we've had to do because we had to increase it if you have a lot of stuff. If you're trying to run your archive command, like telling it where the archive directory is that it gets done. So like you could tell this, if you have like an Azure storage blob somewhere, you can tell Composer that anytime you archive a project to store it on Azure and just pass in your Azure stuff. So yeah, this is definitely one section that like any one of these things can be defined in that config section. And any one of them can be added via a command, the composer config command. Good.
I run into an issue with composer exhausting 8 gigs of memory. And I'm trying to select the flags of like just say allow memory limit to equal 0.
-1.
Wants to, and it still.
That's the PHP memory limit then?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had that happen. I don't think I've ever used 8 gigs, but I've had that happen. There is like you can pass the command to PHP INI setting so that when it runs that command, it will change that INI setting for that specific command, or you can do what I did and just update the INI file to increase your PHP's max memory limit. And so the biggest things you got to remember is, so if you're running like MAMP or Aquate Up Desktop, Calabox, anything like that, all of those are going to have their own separate PHP INIs. But if you're running commands on your machine, whether it be like Composer, Drupal console, just regular Nix commands, those are using PHP's memory. And so you have to figure out where it's installed on your Mac so that you can change that. And so one thing that we've done to basically make this documentationable, if that's not a word, I just made it up, but make it so that you can document that. We've told that if you're using a Mac, install everything with Homebrew. You need to install Composer with Homebrew. So you know where Composer is, install PHP with Homebrew. When you need to change the version, use Homebrew. So now everybody has their PHP and which one they're using for their CLI at a specific location on their Mac so we can give them a direct path of where to go. Outside of, let me teach you a little bit of Linux and how to, or Unix and how to find certain things. And let's see how good you can use grep and regexes and all this other stuff. So,
is there any tips on trying to figure out what package may be causing that huge memory exhaustion? Or is it just
the verbose flag can give you that. Looking inside of your vendor folder to specifically see if like a specific package is too big. If it is, you could try grabbing the distribution for that package, and that you can do it inside of your config. You can tell it to, like, this package right here, use the distribution instead of the other one. But number one, making sure that your cache is big enough for everything that you have, because if you're caching your stuff, anytime that anything changes, it won't physically go out and grab something, it'll just load it from cache. So making sure your cache is high enough, making sure that PHP has enough memory, and then also being more specific on specific packages. If they're super, super huge, then yeah, you might need to grab the distribution version of it. And there's, if you wanted to make your own project that's composer based that you bring into Drupal, there's also a section in their documentation on how to create a distribution version, because it just slims down a bunch of other files that you don't need. So, any other questions? I like this. Lots of questions. No? Anybody want to start using Composer now? Everybody wants to start using Composer? Oh. Prestissimo?
Yeah. Where do you install it? Globally or?
I install it globally. Prestissimo, its install command is actually Composer global require hierarch Prestissimo. So it passes the global command in there to do it. And his example shows, you see how fast that's running? Like, that's installing Laravel, which is kind of like installing Symfony or Drupal. Literally, whoosh. Whereas before, I started using this. I would do this. I would say, Composer update, and I would go for a break. Because I'd go get coffee, I'd make coffee if I need it, and then I'd drink my entire cup of coffee and talk to somebody else, and then I'd go get another cup of coffee, and I'd come back, and it's still running. If I do this, I can't go get more coffee anymore. And literally, I can't. Like, as soon as I tried it once, I went to do it, and then just go really quick, go get some coffee and come back, and it was already done. Like, this is no fun. I picture that old joke about, like, you know, the manager is trying to ask the developers what they're doing, and they're on their chairs sword fighting, and the manager says, "What are you doing?" "Oh, we're compiling." But that's what it was. I got lots of compile time, but not anymore, because someone smarter than me wrote a package that parallel, like, put it all in parallel. So, but otherwise, if you wanted to see what I do on my builds that's composer based, here's an example all the way up until the composer validate fails. Composer self update, global require there, validate it, it failed. It's saying that it's a valid file, but it's just saying it's out of date. Let me see if I can find, without booting up PHP Storm, I wonder. Ooh, that jumped way down. Oh yeah. So after the composer validate, then you can run a composer install, preferred disk, ignore platform rec, optimize your output. That's what I forgot. This is huge for PHP now. So does everybody know what autoloaders are with the PSR4 standard in PHP? Basically, it allows your code to run faster because it knows where to go grab your packages from. and it auto loads it for you. So Composer has an optimized autoloader flag that whenever it goes to create those things, it will optimize the autoloader so that it will base it off of the faster, better way of doing things, which is the PSR4 standard. And don't get me started on the PSR4 standard, there's way too much stuff to learn there. But it's really cool if you can say it fast. I think that's it. We use Bolt with this one, so Bolt creates our project for us. And I believe they use the Drush site install off of it. But to create the project, I'm still not sure what Bolt uses to create the initial project. I'm pretty sure it's not Composer Create Project, because Composer Create Project will create your web directory as web, not Docker. And so if you're hosting on Pantheon, there's a big difference. You need to have a web doc group named web, so we symlink it. But if you're hosting anywhere else, like on Acquia, they, I think, expect it to be named doc group. I kind of like the word doc group because we have a doc root and a project root. And so whenever I'm talking to somebody, they know which level I'm talking. So in our system, there's the doc root, project root. All your vendor files are in the project root, so they're not accessible by the public. I kind of wish Drupal and Drupal 9 would remove all contrib modules from inside of the public-facing web and put them into the vendor directory. There is another thing that you'll find in some of these I gotta find Weber's. He sent a thing for me. Was it in this one? Oh no. Yeah, I thought it was in this one. Maybe it was in the general. Oh, Drupal. Oh, here we go. So, Composer, you can tell it, you can give it an installer paths thing. And this is the way that Drupal is set up. And so when it goes to install libraries, it says if the type equals Drupal core, install it in Drupal core. If the type equals Drupal module, install it in doc root modules contrib. Same with profiles, themes, contrib. This is for Drush. Libraries for font awesome. Still needs to be in libraries folder. Yeah, and then your custom modules too. So if you have a custom module, it'll install it for you that way as well. So you can build your custom modules in a Composer-based workflow, and Composer will know where to put it. Same with your custom themes. So probably another thing I should add. I was anticipating more people using Composer, but I'm ahead of the time when it comes down to it. Everything that I've worked on since starting at ICF Olson, besides my very first project, has been a Drupal 8 site using a Composer-based workflow. I can't really say that's the same for the rest of the Drupal community, because there's a lot of people who are still Drupal 7, some people are running Drupal 6. Go ahead.
Pain points using Composer and Pantheon. Did you have any, and what were they?
No. If you look at Pantheon's documentation, everything that we've done so far has been straightforward. The only thing that we had to do is we had to symlink the doc root directory because we were using Bolt. We're putting hosting companies against each other. So I used Acquia Bolt, and I like their build tools because Pantheon doesn't have any build tools, but we hosted the site on Pantheon because it was going to receive less than 10,000 hits a month. It's an internal site. So all we had to do was symlink the web directory, and that was it. Otherwise, they encourage and then push a Composer-based workflow. So for WordPress sites, we switched one site on there. I believe it's MSP FlyMag, or one of the MSP airport sites is hosted on Pantheon. We switched that to a Composer-based workflow, and so that the next time that they request us to make any changes, that will get completely updated to a Composer-based. Whereas like right now, it's not. They just dump the WordPress site on there and push it out. And another cool thing about Drupal or Pantheon is that they're using PHP 7. So if you wanted to try out PHP 7, I'm sure the Pantheon guys would love to give you a sandbox to try it out. It's a lot faster. So, any other questions, concerns, comments? Don't forget to go to join.me and bash me. Don't forget to come to my work that I no longer go to because I'm working remote for sprinting, which is on my last slide. It's really hard to find. It is right across from Target Field. Really hard to find. So, I'm glad you could join me. Hope you guys learned something. I know this has been, my manager always says, I ask him what I should do my talks on. He's like, do a composer one. I'm like, why? He's like, because you hate it. Because everything you've been doing has been fixing other people's composer problems, so you know so much about it. I'm like, but I don't want to be the composer expert. But other people around me have figured out the easiest way to get out of that loop, and that was
I have one other question.
they went somewhere else. Go ahead.
So, like a composer zero question, you said use Homebrew for it. Do you recommend that for everybody, or was that just for what you're doing?
For Macs, if you use a Mac, like Composer is a dependency package management system. So if you're going to embrace Composer, you better embrace Homebrew because it is a package management system for Macs.
I have problems. So like I'm running MAMP, so you run
That's your
problems with different. Okay, so you recommend against that? Okay.
There's plenty of other ways to get free local hosting on your computer.
Yeah.
Drupal VM is a really, really good way. Requires you to understand how to run one command, which is vagrant up and vagrant provision. But it can get a little tricky. Aquadev Desktop still does a pretty good job of like just creating a local site and using it. They manage their own separate version of PHP. Very easy way to change it. So that's a good one as well. But also if you wanted to go the container-based way, Calabox is a free local way of building a site on containers. So if you know you were hosting on containers, you could build it locally on containers. I think MAMP was created for Windows people who switched over to Macs. Don't quote me on that because I might get in trouble. But no, it's Mac, Windows, Linux. The only one that's been consistent over the years on where they store Apache, where they do this, that, and the other thing has been Linux, right? The last time I don't even think I've updated to the newest version of the Mac OS, but they changed to where Apache was at. Like they changed where sites are installed at. Like, so to keep your computer safe, I recommend not touching any of its software, but bringing in your own, because then you can easily just clean it, start from fresh, but then still rebuild. So all of our projects use Drupal VM right now, and all of the Drupal VM stuff is managed part of the project. So all you need to do is make sure that you have Vagrant, Ansible. There's like 3 or 4 steps. There's just like 4 commands that you run if you're new. You run all that, clone down the project, Vagrant up, and ta-da! You get yourself a site. And so it's quite nice.
Like those things handle like PHP version?
Yes. So Drupal PHP versions. Homebrew is very good at doing that. So for specific versions of PHP, you can tell Homebrew to install PHP 5.6, and then tell it to install PHP 7. And then I believe the only thing that you would require to do is tell Homebrew which version is the correct one, that's the current one. That will put it in your generic path. And then for your user, if you're running, depending on if it's Apache running the commands or if you're running the commands, you will tell it inside of your bash profile to use this version or this version. So you can switch back and forth if you wanted to see an active comparison. But on the flip side to that, I think the newest version of Aquadev Desktop has PHP 7 there. And so all you have to do is open up Aquadev Desktop, tell this site to use PHP 7, stop and start Apache, and away it goes. It's using PHP 7. So there's a whole bunch of other tools that other people have made to make sure that you don't screw up your computer. But if you're brave enough, I have no problem. So, hey, it auto stopped for me. Thank you. Yeah.